Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio radio live stream with no pictures. In this essay, I'd like to go to Canada and talk about the dramas there with Indian students, primarily scam students, who have gone to Canada supposedly to study, but really they're not there to study at all. It's so that they do bullshit courses and in scam Indian colleges, and then use that to say, well, I'm in as a student, and then they're allowed to work, in India, 20 or 30 hours a week, or some have limits, some not. So they're permitted to do that, but they're not for the study at all. That's all nonsense. And there's a huge industry in fake letters of admission to colleges and endless amounts of fakery and forgery and scams going on in the Indians for work, Indian visas, Indian migration industry. It's a massive industry. Now, again, we need to sort of, people ask me, mention sort of why are there so many scams around Indians, students and so on. You have to understand, well, not only that India is a basket case country, their per capita GDP is like, 1/25th or something of what it is in the West, but their productivity in their factories and their so on is like 15 to 20% of the productivity you get in a Western factory. I mean, the whole place is a basket case, and then at the very apex you have this very socially structured sort of society. At the apex you have the Brahmins that are just super entitled, demigod parasites on the Indian sort of populace at large. And these Brahmins, particularly the top two sex society, are incredibly entitled by any measure, and they believe they're entitled to go to the West. They also, there's a huge propaganda class in the Indian upper class as well. So, well, India was a very, very rich country, and the Ganges River and all the rivers, they just flowed with milk and honey. It was a paradise where everybody gave each other flowers and kissed and hugged all day long, until the fucking evil fascist Nazi white men came up. The second they came along, all these riches just vanished, and the Ganges became water instead of milk and honey. And so they've got this absolute fantasy view of the world. So they see that they're entitled to go to the White West, particularly the White West, and take back what evil fascist Nazi whitey stole from. So there's a whole lot of things that go into this sense of entitlement, apart from their smug, self-appointed demigod status. Now, in Canada, as indeed in Australia and the rest of the world. Also, just before I get into the population of India is massive. It's the most populous nation in the world. If you look at the amount of people that want to leave India, that's so perfect and so wonderful, and the West is so evil. You look at the amount of people but almost the entire population of India wants to get out of India and go to the rich West, the rich white West, which is so full of Nazis and racists and everything. So now the population that wants to leave India, is more people than there is in the entire Western rich white Western world. So the Indians in India outnumber the white Western population. So that gives you an idea of the scale of people movement that the Indians would like to see take place. And as the Indian nationalists openly skite in Australia, it won't be too many more years before we're in the majority in Australia, we the Indians meaning, and we will be deciding what happens in Australia. I mean, all scary stuff, eh? But I don't think it'll be much good to the white people if that day comes. Hopefully it won't. Now coming to Canada now, what's happened in and there's a sort of a cross in responsibility of immigration between the federal and the states in Canada, where some of the conditions for immigration, particularly for moving from student visa to, say, permanent residency or longer term work visa, these sorts of things, there's the state or the region, like Manitoba or Prince Edward Island or Alberta or whatever, and the federal government, they kind of control different aspects of it. So the Indians students, they shop around for the easiest scams, wherever the corruption and so on is the easiest, they tend to gravitate towards that. And now the government, whether at district or federal level, the government has issued changes to the visa conditions. Now the visa conditions transitioning from student to say work or anything related to work is you have to have certain skills or capabilities. Now the Indians scam this horribly and have 6-week courses in civil engineering degrees, and endless amount of scams go on there. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But the government in one district in Canada is, well, if you've got expertise in, if you're a qualified nurse, for example, or you're a qualified engineer, as in building engineer, civil engineer, and so, then you can stay. But if all you can do is drive a delivery truck or pour coffee at the local coffee shop, if you don't have any skills working at some retail store, if you don't have any skills, then that are needed, then they gave them 12 months notice that the visa would expire. So meaning that once their studies were completed, and there was a finite time, maybe it's a year, 2 years, 3 years. So whenever their studies are completed or ended, then they have to go back to India or be deported. Now, the Indian students, of course, were outraged by this. I mean, we're an special entitled class. You can't fucking do this to us. And they went straight for the racist thing. It's because you're fascist now, Hitler. And so they take to the streets and they do their. And the media in Canada seem to be astonishingly sympathetic to them. Not a negative word. Nothing. No mention of the scams, no mention of the fake letters of admission, no mention of the forgeries, no mention of the fake educational outfits that are run by scam Indian outfits. Nothing like that is mentioned. These are people, brown people, by the way. So these are people with a genuine grievance, and they're being so badly treated by those evil white folks, and that they have a right to stay, and so on and so forth. So some very sympathetic coverage there. But the reality isn't. There are over. I think there's something like 650,000. If I've understood the numbers correctly, there's something like 650,000 Indian students in Canada. Nearly all of whom want either permanent residency and/or citizenship. And there are some categories of permanent residency, meaning they can bring over their entire wider family and the whole village and all this sort of stuff. And this is what they're, of course, angling for. Now, if we look at the merits of their case, I struggle to see the merits of their case. They haven't come to Canada or the West generally to study. That's bullshit. They've come just to find a backdoor way of getting citizenship that they couldn't otherwise get. And if they manage to score a work visa, say for example, a 3-year work visa, then most people, not all, but most people that complete some studies in Canada and then have a 3-year work visa, then the majority of them are able to transition into permanent residency or indeed citizenship. So that's the scam they want to. So they're outraged their little scam is getting rained on. The parade is getting rained on. So that's really where they're going with this. But I can't see any merit to, as far as I can tell, at least. Now there is an element in it. They're saying, well, we signed for those that signed up. Say they signed up for a 3-year university course, for example, a 3-year university course, and they're only given 12 months notice of a change in visa requirements, as in the student visa transitioning. There is merit to that complaint. But there's as far as I can tell, at least a tiny minority that fall into that category. And then the argument comes up that if you only came to study here, not because you wanted a quality education or a Western education, you only came here to study because it's a means of getting citizenship, then, sorry, the purpose of your arriving was already quite duplicitous to begin with. But it's interesting looking at the Indian nationalist perspective on this. It's just dripping with entitlement. We're entitled to go to the West and get whatever we want. And any corruption, any bribe, any scamming of the process, we are absolutely entitled to do. And it's mind-boggling level of entitlement. And you see it all over the place, whether it's Canada or indeed in Australia. Now, one of the scams I came across recently, I'm sure there are others doing it, but I've only uncovered it with the Indians, or came across it, didn't uncover it, I stumbled across it. We've got we had a client we were doing business with, and their deputy head, I think it was, or head of construction, and it's like an engineering firm, and they build infrastructure and rely exclusively on government contracts, and the government leans on them heavily to employ lots of black lesbians and the like. But so this construction head guy was an Indian guy. I didn't think about it. Now this organisation puts out. And we frequently had projects held up because we have to wait for someone to get hired into a certain role. And it's one of those companies, well, we can't move ahead until we've hired someone, and they keep inventing these really strange new jobs that appear to have no responsibilities, and where it's very vague as to what the person's ever meant to do. But they seem to have a lot of those, which is, I think, part of the diversity and equity hiring that this outfit does. But I looked up the advert for this because they've got it on the job boards, so I looked up the advert, and it was quite rigorous, as you would expect for this sort of job. You must have a civil engineering degree from a reputable sort of, a university. You must have minimum of 10 years experience, and you must have managed $100 million, as in being the chief engineer of $100 million construction projects, $100 million plus construction. So it was quite rigorous. You must have had a certain amount of people reporting to you. So just on paper, at least, it was quite rigorous. So I assumed when this guy must have met that criteria, which was a reasonably exacting criteria. So hey, if the guy meets it, it doesn't matter if he's Indian or the black lesbian or anybody. If you meet that criteria, then fine. Doesn't bother me either way. So anyway, it was sitting down talking to this Indian guy who supposedly, this is the guy they've hired that supposedly met this criteria. Then it was pretty obvious after and I'm not a civil engineer, it was pretty obvious after the first few sentences that he didn't know jack shit about construction and engineering. So that stuck out. So, and he could tell by how the direction the sort of discussion was going that he was about to be 100% exposed as not knowing. And bear in mind, I've hired in the past, I've hired supposedly PhD qualified Indians in like computer science who didn't know jack shit about it. So I can already see the signs as they start to appear. So he was and he has a way of sort of trying to duck the issues, as indeed others do. I am so busy and I have to go to a meeting, so I'm going to have to stop this conversation now. When that's code speak for holy fuck, this guy's about to find out I don't know anything about construction. As it turns out, he's actually got a diploma of construction. This comes back to this Indian scams, educational scams. He's got a diploma of construction. And that turns out to be a 6-week course at this Indian supposedly construction education college, which is bullshit. Now, what they do there, and they've got their website. What they do there is they say, well, these are the keywords and these are the buzz phrases that are used in this industry, in this case, construction. And so what you need to do is memorize the buzzwords, the buzz phrases, and the keywords. You need to memorize those and then regurgitate them, and everyone will think that you know what you're talking about, even though you don't know anything other than the keywords. And it's a very much sort of like a naive college kid thing. If you say the word Hitler sort of 100 times, and that means you're a real social justice warrior, even though you don't know what you're talking about. And it's that same sort of concept of logic, where as long as I mention the key words often enough, then people are going to think I know. And so that's all it was. Now, but somehow he slipped through the cracks, and I'm fucked if I know how. Like I don't believe they didn't know. Anybody who's been, I mean, I'm not a civil engineer doing projects, and I picked it straight away, pretty much, that the guy didn't know what he's doing. So they've hired this guy. Now, he meets none of the criteria in the advert, yet they still hired him. Now, that's the diversity, equity, inclusion sort of scam in itself, but that's how these people were able to get away with these things so much, because of the race quotas and because of DEI, that they're able to go through just an endless series of scams and subterfuge and fake letters of admission, fake colleges, fake degrees and fake diplomas, and still able to get through. No wonder they think we're a bunch of idiots in the West, and that they're entitled, because we must be so easy as a group to scam. But there you go. You've been with Tassless today, your Pushback Channel. Thank you for listening.